a question and answer session. All right, so to start off with, for those of you not familiar, PlanSwift is a digital on-screen takeoff tool. It's very similar to some of the other bigger names out there like Home Center and some of the other ones you may have heard of. But it's a fairly simple and straightforward tool on just doing on-screen takeoffs. We've created a plugin inside it simply because PlanSwift, the way they've set up their architecture, is they invite third parties to create tools, and it's allowed us to embed a plugin inside their software that's intimately linked to ProjectPAK, such that there's no dual maintenance or anything like that I've seen in some other systems. The only maintenance you have to keep up is on your ProjectPAK database, because our link will read directly out of your database. So whatever assemblies and library items you have in there, that's what you'll see inside our link. And it allows you to create a takeoff inside PlanSwift. It creates objects in PlanSwift based off the assemblies and library items you have inside ProjectPAK. And then as you'll see, once you're done with the click of the button, it creates project and estimate inside ProjectPAK based upon that. So really, for the most part, the only setup you have inside the plugin itself is bringing in drawings, which is a simple process. I've already brought in some today simply because PlanSwift themselves have tutorials on how to do it. I think there's like a 2 or 3 minute tutorial on how to bring in drawings. It reads about any type of drawing you can throw at it, including PDFs. Once you get the drawings in there, the next step is scaling a drawing, because you can't do a takeoff without scaling it, which once again, I've already scaled the 2 drawings that we'll be working in today. But I think they have a 41-second tutorial that shows you how to scale a drawing, so I'm not going to go through that process today. It's very simple and straightforward. The only other tool, for the most part, that you use inside PlanSwift that can be beneficial in doing the takeoff is down in this lower left corner. There's an area called bookmarks. And a bookmark works the same as like a hotspot in OnCenter in that it just remembers where your view is. So for instance, today we're going to do a takeoff. I'll zoom in on, we're going to do a takeoff on this snack 129 area. So now that I've zoomed it in and kind of have it right where I want to, I'm going to click this button here that says New Bookmark, and I'm just going to name it accordingly. Snack 129. I'll click OK. And what just popped up on the screen is what they call their snapshot, which in essence, it's just like a digital picture. If you had 2 screens, you could move this around just so you have a reference if you want to leave it open on your screen. I'm going to go ahead and close it for our purposes today. But you see this little camera shot here? That just simply means if you click it, it'll bring up that snapshot so that you just have a reference. The other thing I'm going to do, too, is I'm going to go to this A3.3 and find the elevation for this A3.3, which is right here. And I'm going to zoom in on it and save a bookmark, just the same as I did before. Now I'll leave this snapshot off. And just like I say, the whole idea is you can have these bookmarks. So just like if I click back on the Snack 129, it jumps me back to the view I saved so that you can easily navigate back and forth. So that's for the most part what bookmarks are for. So once we have our drawings in there, we have them scaled. You can create bookmarks if you want. We simply just go to the ProjectPAK toolbar up here, and you click Add Item. And that brings up our link. And this is what our new ProjectPAK PlanSwift link looks like. And if you've used ProjectPAK 7.0 already and you're familiar with it, you'll notice there's a lot of similarities to the estimate sheet. On your left, you create a tree structure similar to what you do in ProjectPAK. As well as to your right, you see the assemblies and the library tabs, which look exactly the same as they do inside ProjectPAK. So there's a lot of similarities here to make using it simple. On the left, I'm going to go ahead and click on the estimating, which is kind of the same as like what the base bid is in ProjectPAK. And I'm just going to right-click it and choose New Subfolder so that I can create our Snack 129 room. And you'll see from here, if you have more than one of the same room, you can change the quantity. You can also add notes if you want. All of this carries over into ProjectPAK. I'm going to click OK, and you'll see now it creates a new summary node in the tree. So setting up this tree is similar if you use ProjectPAK, but you're going to set up your tree structure. So, if there was a bigger tree structure to this job, maybe there was a area A and an area B, or a phase 1, phase 2, I'd want to create those nodes first, and then underneath those nodes, create the nodes I've created here. So it's up to you to build your tree as would be appropriate for your estimate. So once we have our summary node here, now it's just a matter of, similar to in ProjectPAK, it's a drag and drop process. So if we were looking at this and maybe the first item we wanted, if I click back on here, let's go ahead and do the countertop first. So if we wanted to do the countertop, simply go to my countertop category, and I go find the appropriate countertop, which in my case is countertop with backsplash. I'm just going to drag it and drop it to the center here. And when I drop it, now it fills in with all the information based on that assembly inside ProjectPAK. And all the attributes come in as you would typically see. A couple things you'll notice is that if you were in the Lunch and Learn on the estimate sheet, there is a new utility, a functionality in ProjectPAK 7.0 that allows you to either change the name of your custom columns or hide or unhide them. Inside our link, we don't hide the names of the columns simply because we need it to create the PlanSwift object. However, if you chose not to show it, it just says not used and they're not enabled. So that way, similar in ProjectPAK, from an estimating or takeoff standpoint, you're just filling in the appropriate attributes that make sense for the particular assembly. Inside the link, though, we do allow you can change the description if you want, just like you could in ProjectPAK. You can actually fill in a drawing reference, so we could say 3 on a 3.3, and then obviously change in the attributes that would be appropriate. In our case, I think it's a 7-foot top, and there's a sink. So I'm going to change these attributes. As you can see down at the bottom, if you use work groups, you can also fill in your work groups as appropriate. A couple other things that probably make sense is that there's also a Notes tab, so on a per item basis you can fill in notes. Those transfer over to ProjectPAK. And then also you can also set bookmarks. If you're the type that likes to set bookmarks, if it makes sense to set them here, you can create them here and they'll show up inside ProjectPAK. Once you have all this filled in, you're now ready to do your takeoff. One last note to show you. You'll notice down here too there's also a digitizer color and a type. Where it gets this information, if I go back to ProjectPAK and I'm on the Assembly tab here, in the Assembly settings you can now go to the Defaults tab, and you now have the ability to choose a default color and also to fill in the digitizer type, whether it's a counter, which would be correlates to an each, like if you were doing cabinets, linears, probably more for moldings, or you could do an area if you're doing a square footage. So it's up to you on your database to go per assembly, fill in the correct digitizer type, as well as if you want a specific color scheme. As you'll see in my demo database, I picked a color for base cabinets, one for wall, one for tall, I think one for countertops, and one for millwork. If you don't set these, what it'll do inside the link is that this color, it'll just randomly choose a color, and the digitizer type will always default to counter. So if you haven't set up your database and set any of the defaults, it'll be up to you to change them at the time that you do your takeoff. And if for some reason you needed to change this color, you simply click it and then just choose your color. So that's how you can set up your default color scheme in your database, so that no matter who does their takeoff, it always looks the same and it makes sense. One thing you'll notice on my countertop is I've set up my assembly by the each, so I'm filling in attributes. Yours may be by the lineal foot, so obviously your digitizer type you want to change to lineal, and you'd be doing your takeoff most likely on the floor plan rather than the elevation. So it just depends on how your assemblies are set up as to what makes sense for your digitizer types and color schemes, obviously. Once you have all this information filled in, you simply click Start New Digitizer. It's going to jump me back to PlanSwift, and now it's going to ask me to, in this case, since it's just a counter, I'm going to mark. So I just click. It leaves a little yellow circle since I picked yellow as the color. I hit Escape on my keyboard, and it takes me back to the plugin. So now I've marked my countertop. From here, it's just a similarly repetitive process. So all I'm going to do is find the next item, which is, I believe, was a two-door cabinet. So I'm going to drag it and drop it similarly. And then if I move this, looks like it's 30 3/8. So depending on how accurate you want to be, you could be that accurate if you want it to be. Once you have any attributes, notes, or bookmarks filled in as appropriate, you just click Start New Digitizer, and you mark them appropriately. So in this case, I have two that are exactly alike. I hit Escape and repeat the process. So it's a similar process. One thing you'll notice, too, is that the drawing reference remembers what it was last so that you wouldn't have to type it in for every object on an elevation. So that's one thing we fill in for you if you fill it in the first time. So just kind of going through what the next item is. I believe this was 24. Click Start New Digitizer, and then mark it appropriately. And say it's close enough to 24. But you do have the ability. There's a couple different ways. If for some reason, maybe you got an attribute wrong or you needed to change one, you can expand this and click on the object that you want to change. Here's all your attributes, and then I could change it here if I wanted to. Or inside PlanSwift, there's a little window to the right that I have set up that I believe is called, if you go to the Windows tab, it's called your Parts window, that it also displays depending upon which one of your objects you've selected. So if I select this one, it fills it in. And from here, you could also change an attribute if you wanted to. So here, I could make it 23 1/4 if I wanted to. And that'll change it as well in the link. So you can change it either place. It's completely up to you, whichever place would be appropriate. So if I were on here and then I clicked back on the same object, you'll see it's updated based upon what I typed in PlanSwift in this case. And so, like I say, from here it's just a repetitive process, especially if you're doing counters like what I'm doing, so that you can mark everything appropriately. So I think the next item's a wall cabinet. Yeah, I got a two-door wall cabinet. So now we'll just grab it, drag it, and drop it. It's 24 high with a shelf. Click Start New Digitizer, and we'll mark it as appropriate. I'm going to put in the next one different than that one simply because it has a finished in. So in my parametric world here, it makes a difference because it changes underlying material and labor once we get it inside ProjectPAK. So I'll mark it accordingly. And looks like I got one more assembly for this particular room. And click Start New Digitizer, mark it. And then for our purposes, for our demo today, we'll say we're done with that room. If I go back to PlanSwift, I'm going to go ahead and jump back to the floor plan. Because now that we have that room done, similar to like what you do if you had a piece of paper, you would highlight it. There's a tool inside PlanSwift under the Annotations toolbar called a highlighter. And as you can see here, you can choose whatever color you desire. But it works just the same as if you're using a highlighter on paper. So you click it, and you simply mark the outline to highlight it. Because in this case, since my countertops aren't by the lineal, it's just an easy way for me to mark it that it's been taken off. So that way, if I zoom out, you can see I have another room I did before this session, as well as this one, so we'd have at least something decent coming over into ProjectPAK. But so now I can easily tell I've taken these 2 rooms off. Well, let's go ahead and go back to our PlanSwift plugin. And I'm going to create another summary node here. And I'm just going to call it running trim, just to show you how simple it is to do moldings as well. So I'm going to click OK. And then inside here, I'll go find my molding. I'll drag it and drop it in. And my molding's a generic one. So maybe in this case, I'm doing a crown molding. And maybe it's 3/4 by 3/4 by 6 1/4. So I'll go through here and change my attributes as would be appropriate. So they come over into ProjectPAK appropriately. And now I'm going to click Start New Digitizer. And once again, it's going to take me back to PlanSwift. And just to show you that it's easy to do angles, and I don't have a plan here that has curves, but you could also do curves if you needed to. But I'm going to take off this area here, and we'll pretend that there's crown molding in here. Unrealistic, because obviously in these little rooms you wouldn't have it, but just so I could find a small room to show you with angles and such. There's a unique little function in PlanSwift called the Magnifier. If you hit M on your keyboard, it brings it up like a magnifying glass so that you don't have to zoom in so much if you want to be a little more accurate. And I can just pick all the points of this particular room. And when I'm done, I can hit C to close it in. It takes me back here, and as you can see, that little room is about 17.5 lineal feet. Well, let's say I did that room, but since I just have it set up as running trim and I want to do other rooms and just add it in, I can simply click on my object here and then come down here and say Add to Existing Digitizer. It's going to take me back to PlanSwift, and now I can start clicking points again just like I did before. And then hit C to close it in, and now I'm done. Oops, hit it too many times. And now as you can see, it just aggregates the quantity, so now I have a total of 45.05. So you can always add to any digitizer object. That's true whether it's a lineal foot or it's a by the each. If for some reason you were doing the takeoff on an elevation, maybe you found a 2-door wall cabinet, you clicked 1, hit escape, came back, and then realized, oh, there's another 1 or 2 just like it. You can do the same thing. You can find the digitizer object, click Add to Existing, and then mark it, and then it'll just aggregate your quantity. So as you can see, doing running trims, moldings, fairly straightforward. Let me add one more summary node here, and then I'll show you how we can easily send it over to ProjectPAK. I'm going to add one more summary node, and I'm going to call it Reception Desk. Because let's say you have something in here that's a custom item. How do you handle that inside here? Because the item, obviously in ProjectPAK, you'd add a product and start dragging in library items. Well, keep in mind in PlanSwift, we're just doing a takeoff. So if nothing else, we want to be able to mark that object so that once we get it into ProjectPAK, we can then add the material and labor and do what else we need to do with it. So inside here, I've created an assembly for myself that I used to use in the past a lot. And it's just simply called custom assembly. But especially inside our PlanSwift link, this becomes really handy because now I can drag this in. I can change the description, so I'm going to call it a custom reception desk wall, we'll call it. I can fill in the drawing reference. I've actually set it up so I could fill in the width, depth, and height if it was appropriate. Obviously, since this isn't parametric, there's no formulas. This is just there for my reference. But probably more important than anything, I can fill in my notes. So if I was looking at the specs or the drawings, I could give myself notes so when it comes into ProjectPAK, I can easily read the notes. So maybe it makes my doing the material and labor part of it easier, or at least gives me reminders. Or better yet, if it's a different person, maybe just as the person doing the takeoff, it's just your job to do the takeoff and mark it. the more custom items like this, maybe it's somebody else's job to fill in the material and labor. And from my perspective, that's where bookmarks come in a lot more handy, because now I can flag it, and maybe the bookmark I'll make red just so it stands out. And now I can leave myself a note. And this will actually transfer over into ProjectPAK so that whether it's you or another person can easily see, hey, here's my bookmark. So these are the items I need to add material and labor to, or I need to do something else to. In this case, obviously, it's adding material and labor. And like I said, you could add your notes here as they would be appropriate to give yourself reminders or just notes. Similar to before, now that I've filled in appropriate information, I can click Start New Digitizer. And then on here, you could either do it, I could just flag it here. Here's my reception desk. Or, if I had scaled the interior elevation, I could do it there. For our purposes today, I'm just going to click it here to mark it. Hit Escape, and now that item's in here. And since I have this summary node, if the reception desk had other assemblies that were typical of yours, I could go through here. Like if I went to drawer stack, I could add in file drawers, pencil drawers, supports, whatever else would be underneath it that you would consider a typical assembly. You could drag those inside the summary node too. So, maybe we have a file drawer, and I'll just click Start New Digitizer. Maybe there's one here and here. Just so you can see that different things will come over. So now you've marked it accordingly. Well, let's say for our purposes today, this was our estimate. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Obviously, yours are probably going to be more in-depth than this, but the concept is there. Like I say, it's a fairly repetitive process. You right-click, add those summary nodes as you need them, and then drag and drop. Mark them as digitizers if they're counters or if they're lineal. Do them that way, or if they're square footage. I know a lot of people do solid surface by the square foot. You can do square footages in here too. And that can be angles, curves, all that's feasible inside PlanSwift. But let's say, like I said, let's say we're done with this. We're ready to send it over into ProjectPAK. To send it over into ProjectPAK, all we have to do is go to our ProjectPAK tab and click the button that says Send to ProjectPAK. Once we do that, a new dialog box will pop up, and now we just have to add in the appropriate information. So as you can see in here, it shows us our estimate tree, the same as we created it in our link. So this is what it'll more or less look like inside ProjectPAK. Click Find Customer, so you can find the customer that exists in ProjectPAK. If it happened to be a new customer that you were doing this takeoff for, you'd want to create them first inside ProjectPAK as a business so you could easily find them in here. We'll pick TJ Gall and Associates for today. Pulls in the description as you call it in PlanSwift. You can give it a project ID if you want. And then ultimately assign who the estimator is. So in this case, it's me. Once you're done, you click Create Project. And now, depending upon the size of your takeoff, it's now going to create the project and estimate inside ProjectPAK. So it's taking these kind of more simplistic objects, pulling them in, creating your estimate in the same tree structure, only now, once we get in there, it's going to add in all the attributes, the quantities, and put material and labor and all your numbers to it, so you have a real quote with real numbers. So, like I say, in a few moments here, it'll create it, and then we'll open it up in ProjectPAK. While it's doing that, talk about another option that we have in here too. You'll notice up here it says Refresh Local Database. What we've done inside our link is allow you that you don't have to be connected to the network to use the link with PlanSwift. So in other words, let's say maybe you have it on a laptop, and maybe you're planning on working on a takeoff at home or just away from the office. What you do is you click Refresh Local Database, and what it does is it creates a local database on the machine that's an exact copy of your network database with all the assemblies and library items, and it creates it on your machine so that you can disconnect from the network wherever you're at, do your takeoff, because under Setup, Really, the only two choices you have in there is whether you're using the network database or the local database. So you'd select local. And then you do your whole takeoff as would be appropriate. Once you got back into the office, now you can connect to the office, change it to network database, and now you can send it to ProjectPAK and be off and on your way. So that, like I say, you don't have to be connected to the network. And then any subsequent times, before you leave, just click refresh local database so you have an exact copy of the network database in case something changed. In other words, maybe somebody added an assembly or a library item that you need available for the takeoff, and it's there waiting for you. All right, so now that it's created our estimate, we'll go back to ProjectPAK here, and then we'll just simply go to the Estimate tab and go ahead and open the estimate. So I'll click Search here, go find our, here it is, Hickory Elementary School, and so we'll click this. Sure enough, once it calculates and loads in, and so sure enough, here's our estimate the exact same way we created it in PlanSwift. The only difference now is obviously all the materials and labors are in there, and now we have our true estimate with numbers. So just the same as we did in there. All of these are exactly the same. Just if I click on the edit row, it brings over everything just as we did it inside PlanSwift. So now we have a real live estimate. Now what we'd need to do, obviously, we've got it inside here, so now you could go through and apply your job specs as they would be appropriate, as well as anything else that you might need to do. Notice here's our bookmark that I created for our custom reception desk wall, as well as if I go down to the row notes, here's the notes I added. So all that transfers over. Keep in mind, too, with bookmarks, obviously I knew where to look for this one is. It's a little different with the tree than it used to be with the grid, because obviously you could just scroll down your grid and find all the bookmarks if you wanted to. Here, you're not going to see the grid unless you're in the specific node. But keep in mind, if you anywhere on the grid, if you right-click and you go down to Bookmarks and you go to View Bookmarks, it brings up the same dialog box as before, and it will list every single bookmark that you have in your estimate. And if you want to jump to a bookmark, all you have to do is double-click it, and it jumps you to that bookmark. So similar to the new errors dialog, if you click it, it takes you to it. So even if you did a huge one, maybe you had 5 custom reception desk walls. Hopefully you spelled them better than I did, but even if you had 5 or 10, that somebody else or you needed to add it to, they would be in this list for any of your bookmarks, and so you could easily keep this list up, double-click it, and jump to each one. Obviously, once you got it done, you could remove the bookmark. But so like I said, now all you're doing inside ProjectPAK is kind of putting the final touches on your estimate, whether it's as simple as inside here. Now I come over here and start dragging and dropping library items inside this custom reception desk to complete that, and or go to job spec and then apply job spec accordingly. And your estimate's done for you. So for the most part, there's our PlanSwift link. The last half here, I'll just open it up for questions and answer them best I can.
Hey, Dave.
Yeah.
Dave?
Yes.
What about the possibility of, in addition to a drag, do a double click? I know you can't right now.
You mean inside the link itself?
Yes, correct.
Oh, instead of dragging and dropping it to the middle, just double clicking it?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like the way it works in ProjectPAK right now. We can just double click.
Okay. All right.
It's an option. And then the other question is, where does the information reside in PlanSwift? In other words, if can I, how you can send the PlanSwift file via email? does that reside basically on that estimating tab?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
If I go to PlanSwift here and then go to the estimating tab, here's all
Fabulous.
the items. Just
Fabulous.
That's what I'm saying. We're just creating objects inside PlanSwift that are just based upon your assemblies in ProjectPAK.
I got you. This is too easy. This is just the graphic version of that Excel that Russ had, taking the flat files and jamming them in. This is cool.
Yeah. 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 Very similar.
Hey Dave, what if you've done the estimate, you've done it in PlanSwift, created it in ProjectPAK, and then you realize you missed something?
In the current version, this first go around, as you will, there isn't any functionality in there for it to decipher what you've changed and what you haven't. So in that case, depending upon what you missed, you got one of two choices. If it's just one or two things, if you want it to be in both systems, you could do it in PlanSwift and then manually add it in ProjectPAK. Or if it's something more substantial, you could add it in PlanSwift and then reconvert it into ProjectPAK and just create a new estimate and delete the old one, depending upon what you've done and what you haven't. Obviously, if you've done a lot of work to the one in ProjectPAK already, that may or may not make sense. At least in this first go-around, we didn't provide any functionality for any kind of updating in that sense.
And what about breaking it in if there's alternates or change orders? Is that something you would have to change once it's been converted into ProjectPAK? And
yeah, obviously alternates are a lot easier because, even if this reception desk were an alternate, all I have to do is click on it and check alternate, and now it's an alternate.
right.
So as far as alternates go, that's pretty easy. Change order-wise, yeah, ultimately, I guess it depends on when it comes in and if you need it in PlanSwift as well, depending on what else you're using PlanSwift for.
Right.
So yeah, like I say, in the first go-around, there's no functionality for a true, smart enough to know, hey, what's changed, what hasn't, and just update it. So you either have to bring it in as a new estimate or just manually do it in both. But the idea is at least the first go-around, hopefully you don't miss too many things, but the bulk of it's in there and pretty quick. Sped up, your takeoff process considerably. Because for those of you I don't know, some of you have probably used PlanSwift as a standalone. I found once I got our link, the link is actually quicker than if you manually created your assemblies in PlanSwift and did it through their means, at least in 8.7, because it's kind of a pain. They have a couple dialog boxes you have to go through, so it's actually quicker with the link. So
this won't work on 9.0?
It will not work on 9.0. However, unfortunately, it's just like any upgrades. As soon as we got our link done, PlanSwift told us they were going to release 9.0. And similar to how 7.0 in our world is worlds different than 6.1, their 9.0, they changed a lot of their underlying structure, so our link will not work in it. We've already started researching what it's going to take, what we have to change, so that we match their underlying structure and it'll work. Our goal is to release a version that'll work with 9.0 this summer. So 9.0 will be out this summer. I'd like to tell you an exact date, but that's as much as I can tell you. We're in the process of researching it and starting to develop it, so that, because like I say, their underlying structure changed a ton, just like ours did in 7.0. But we will get a version that'll work in 9.0 as soon as we can. Real quick, too, looks like through the chat log, Lilith, you asked how do you take off doors and frames. If you were working in a database where you had doors and frames, they would be assemblies, just the same as these cabinets are. For instance, I think in this one, I actually have a door jam here. So you would do the takeoff just the same as you would a cabinet, they would just be by the counter. So, if I put it in running trim, for lack of a better place to put it, just simply drag and drop. Change the attributes as would be appropriate. Click Start New Digitizer, and then, mark where they would be. If you had an assembly that were both combined, same difference. So it's the same process if you were doing the doors and frames. Any other questions?
Dave, where do we get PlanSwift?
PlanSwift, you can go to our website, and we have a link on our website to PlanSwift's site, and then you can download PlanSwift itself and then get in touch with them as far as pricing and purchasing it. Once you have PlanSwift, then you'd purchase the link from us. The actual link from us, I believe, is $500 a link.
Okay.
And I believe PlanSwift is under $1,000. And then I think they have a maintenance contract similar to what we do. Only theirs is only a couple $100 if my memory serves me correct. That was one of the other added features, is that PlanSwift software was about a third the price of OnCenter and some of the other ones out there, which made it kind of nice too, so that we don't hurt your pocketbook quite as much as if we were going with somebody else. Any other questions?
So you don't use anything in the, it's all assemblies in the PlanSwift. You don't, the library really doesn't come into play?
You could use the library. Just remember, that's why, like for instance, I'm trying to think in this database. Yeah, if I go into miscellaneous, I have these countertop brackets.
Yeah.
You can drag those and drop those here. You can actually change attributes, although on most library items it's not really necessary. But it's a similar process where you click Start New Digitizer, and just like if I had a few in here, I could place them.
Oh. All right.
So yeah, you can most certainly use library items just the same. So if you have items like that you want to drag in that makes sense, you certainly can. I would just keep from, I know when I demoed this a few months ago to somebody, they were asking me, when you do those custom assemblies, well, couldn't you, put this in here and then drag a bunch of library items into it? You could, but just keep in mind on your PlanSwift drawing, you're going to have a bazillion dots if you do that. It's not to say you can't. Just realize that on the PlanSwift, you might have a bunch of dots that won't make sense at first, but you could certainly do it. It's just inside PlanSwift. These are summary nodes that more correlate to a summary node in ProjectPAK. You can't change these into like a product or anything. It would just be a summary node. I mean, once you got it into ProjectPAK, you can obviously edit it to your heart's content. But keep that in mind if you want to go that route. But yeah, certainly you can use library items like that to your heart's extent. Any other questions? All right. Well, that concludes our Lunch and Learn session on our PlanSwift plugin. Just keep in mind, as I usually say, if you have any other questions about it after the session, feel free to call support. We'll answer your questions the best that we can. And also keep in mind, all these Lunch and Learn sessions we're recording and putting on our website for you to view however many times you want to afterwards. They'll just be underneath the Support tab and underneath ProjectPAK. So feel free to click on them and download them and watch them. Thank you very much for attending.